quite a few years. The County of Mendocino has limited resources to sustain the current level of expenditure for operations for 08-09. The proposed budget for this fiscal year 08-09 represents the third year of a declining rate of growth in revenues and increased costs. Stealing a couple sentences from the CEO's overview, to the casual observer, the county budget appears to be balanced with no layoffs of permanent employees. The reality is the county has not kept pace with its debt obligations, and the cost of doing business has increased every year. My one and only opening comment will be, this county is at a crossroads. The till is dry, and we are facing the situation of declining revenues and increasing demand for services, and those two do not coincide. This budget represents opportunities and options to make those things come back into alignment. Again, this is only the proposed budget. A lot of work has yet to be done, and will be coming forward in the next couple of months on into the final budget adoption in August. The main point I'm trying to get across is we cannot continue to sustain the level of services with the amount of revenues that we have. So, to that, Mr. CEO, take it over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those of you that just came in a few minutes ago, there are a few copies of the proposed budget overview here by the front podium that staff has placed up there for you to follow along. It is a workshop today, a work session. We will be recommending adoption of the proposed budget next week on the 24th with a number of other issues. I've been with Mendocino County about 9 months now, so I think I've had the opportunity to look at many of the ways which we've done business. Some of the things that were done that were a little confusing to me when I first came aboard, and the approach that we've taken. And you'll see in my opening statement, the message we're trying to get across is really, it's about a declining rate of growth in revenues. It's not that our revenues are declining so much, but it's the rate of growth that has decreased along with our increased costs. The board has made some tough decisions over the last few years, one of which I've highlighted in there had to do with our negotiation with our union groups. We were at a point in history in looking at the various background that I've seen that we needed to take some decisive action regarding our employees and what we were paying them, how far we were out of market. It's difficult to recruit in today's world in the government sector if you don't pay a competitive salary, and you really are trying to attract a talented workforce. And I think the board has been wise in how it's chosen to spend money in reinforcing in those areas. I think you'll see that strategy will pay off in the future. Our employees are, I think, appropriately compensated for the most part now, and that we've solved that particular problem. The next year's budget that we're talking about today, it really has been balanced with a combination of reductions in staffing. We've delayed vehicle purchases, and we've made some one-time reductions. But how we've closed what we call this gap in funding as a temporary balancing mechanism for the proposed budget is we are not making the complete teeter debt payment. Those of you that are not familiar with the county's budget, we did incur some debt financing for, again, some sound reasons in the past, but we've not been able to keep up with those payments. Although we are making a little progress in this year's budget, we're not making the progress toward ultimately retiring that almost $10 million worth of debt that's out there at this point in time. One of the other concerns I've highlighted here is the dismal state of what's going on with the state of California's budget because of the economy and what has been going on. We've borrowed an awful lot of money over the last few years at the state level, and all of those loans have to be paid off at the same time. Not paid off, payments have to be made on them at the same time that California, by all intents and purposes, is facing a severe recession at this point in time. There are rumors that have been floating around Sacramento. Obviously, they will not be adopting a budget by July 1 as they're required to do by law. That will not happen again this year. There are rumors that the state will be out of cash by mid-September at some point. When the state looks at their balancing strategy, what we've heard, I think, the most out of them is they will be proposing through the legislature some form of revenue enhancement bonds, and whether that's connected with the lottery or whether that's connected with the sales tax increase, we don't know. But the best intelligence we've had so far from our own state organization is we think the legislature will probably pass a budget in sometime in August, because it requires a sufficient period of time to ramp up for those sale of bonds and other purposes. So we're hopeful that as we go through this process, we'll get some lead time to make some of the next set of decisions that we need to make before we to go through and do our final budget. I think it's fairly obvious in the way I portrayed it here is obviously in the nonpartisanship of what we have going on in Sacramento. Obviously, we have a strong contingent on the Republican side that's interested in supporting law enforcement activities, and we have a strong commitment on the other side of the fence to fund social programs. How those two groups come about and agree on how we're going to fund the state's budget is what our real challenge is going to be, and it will be really social programs versus some of the law enforcement expenditures, and we are concerned about as those decisions are made. We're also concerned in our office that we have a number of things coming up in the future. We see throughout California, the most recent one, Santa Cruz, just a day or so ago, there was a news article in Santa Cruz County. They had 6,000 properties up for reassessment because of the decline in the economy. That market was driven a lot by Silicon Valley. I think they had some probably highly inflated values on property, but there are 6,000 properties that their assessor is going to be looking at having to revalue over the next year, which is going to cost Santa Cruz County $1 million in property tax revenues. We have not seen that growth in Mendocino County, so I don't think you're going to see that same level occurring. But as we go through and we go forward in our office and we're looking at some strategies on how to stabilize, and that's what we're really shooting for at this point, is to stabilize our general fund expenditures. Whenever it's difficult, whenever you talk about an expenditure at the county, there are always connections related